My name is Maris Elwood, and I turned 29 last month, old enough to have learned that silence can bruise deeper than words. That morning, the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint clink of my father's coffee spoon. The smell of toasted bread drifted through the kitchen, the same as every weekday morning. He was already at the table, newspaper folded neatly beside his mug, his glasses sliding halfway down his nose. I set my tool bag by the door and tried to sound casual. I'll be heading out in an hour. Just a 2-day maintenance job in Eugene. Dad didn't look up right away. He stirred the cup again, longer than needed, the spoon tapping against the ceramic like a clock I couldn't stop hearing. We used to talk about engines, welding projects, the way light bends in metal when it's heated just right. Since he started seeing Patricia last spring, though, every sentence between us seemed to shrink. He finally said, "Truck running okay?" "Yeah. Changed the oil last week." "That's good." That was it. No drive safe. No call when you get there. Just the scrape of his chair as he stood, rinsing his cup before I'd even sat down. He wiped his hands on a towel, left it draped unevenly on the counter, and disappeared down the hallway. I ate standing by the sink, watching the frost melt off the yard. The house felt smaller than it had yesterday, like the walls had leaned in overnight. When I finished, I slung the tool bag over my shoulder and stepped outside. The air was crisp, the sky pale with early sun. My truck engine rumbled to life, steady and familiar. I backed out of the driveway without looking toward the front window. Tomorrow night, I'd be home again, or at least, I thought I would. The highway out of Bend stretched long and empty, the kind that lets your thoughts run faster than the tires. I rolled the window halfway down, letting cold mountain air whip through the cab. It smelled faintly of pine and diesel, familiar, grounding. Jobs like this were routine maintenance on the mill's loading system. 2 days of grease, sparks, and silence. It paid enough to cover rent for the small place I was hoping to move into by winter. Still, I couldn't shake the way Dad's spoon had tapped against his mug that morning, steady and final. By the time I reached Eugene, the afternoon light had softened to amber. I checked in at the motel, ate at the diner next door, and listened to the murmur of other travelers, construction guys, a family passing through, a waitress whose voice sounded practiced but kind. I liked places like that. No one asked what you were running from. After dinner, I called my coworker, Cal, to confirm the next day's shift. He mentioned Dad had stopped by the shop last week, asked about me, seemed short-tempered. Cal said, like he was looking for something to blame. I laughed it off, pretending it didn't sting. "That's just him," I said, though I wasn't sure anymore. Back in the room, I laid my welding gloves on the dresser beside the TV remote, their edges darkened from heat. My hands ached pleasantly, the kind of ache that meant purpose. Outside, a freight train passed somewhere in the dark, its horn low and steady, fading like a promise half kept. I fell asleep to the rhythm of it, believing that when I came home in 2 days, everything would still be where I left it. I finished the job earlier than expected. The mill foreman signed off the paperwork just after 3, and by 4, I was back on the road toward Bend. The drive home was smooth, a ribbon of gray cutting through pine and farmland. I told myself I'd surprise Dad with takeout from Baxter's Deli, the kind of olive loaf sandwich he pretended not to like but always finished. The sun was low by the time I turned onto our gravel road. From a distance, the house looked the same, white siding, blue trim, the porch light already glowing though it wasn't dark yet. For a second, I felt that small pulse of comfort that comes from seeing something familiar after a few nights away. Then the headlights caught a row of black garbage bags lined along the fence. Dozens of them. Some were torn open, spilling shirts, socks, notebooks, and the welding gloves I'd left on my workbench. My old duffel bag sat upright by the mailbox, half unzipped, the corner of my jacket hanging out. At first, my brain refused to translate what my eyes saw. I slowed the truck, waiting for a sign that this was some misunderstanding. But then I saw Dad standing by the gate with his arms crossed. Patricia lingered behind him, phone in hand, her expression unreadable. I killed the engine and stepped out. The air smelled faintly of dust and oil, the way it does before a storm. "What's all this?" I managed. "Dad didn't move. You don't live here anymore." His voice was steady, rehearsed. I laughed, small and shaky. "Come on. What are you talking about?" Patricia shifted, tucking her phone into her jacket pocket. "Dean, just tell her." He pointed toward the bags. "Your things. Been waiting for you to pick them up. Patricia needs the space for her boys." The words didn't land all at once. I looked past him, toward the house. The window of my old room was dark, curtains gone. I tried to keep my voice even. "You could have called." He shrugged. "Didn't see the point." Behind him, a neighbor's porch light flicked on. I caught movement in the corner of my eye, a silhouette raising a phone. Recording. My throat tightened. I bent down and picked up one of the bags. A corner split open, spilling out a framed photo of Mom holding me as a kid. Both of us laughing. The glass had cracked down the middle. Dad shifted his weight but didn't help. Patricia sighed loudly, like this had gone on long enough. I tied the bag shut and lifted it into the truck bed, one by one. The gravel crunched under my boots, every step louder than the last. When I finished, I wiped my palms on my jeans and looked back once. Dad had already turned away, walking toward the porch. The door closed behind him with a hollow click that sounded nothing like home. The air felt heavier the longer I stood there, the kind that presses down on your chest and makes every breath sound too loud. The porch light buzzed above Dad's head as he came back out, this time holding his phone. He wasn't recording, but he might as well have been the way he squared his shoulders, the way his voice changed when he noticed the neighbor across the street. "Let's not make a scene," he said. It was almost funny, considering my life was scattered across the front yard. Patricia stood beside him, arms folded, expression calm in that practiced way people use when they want to look reasonable. "We've talked about this, Dean," she said gently, but loud enough for the neighbor to hear. "You can't keep enabling her." Her words sliced through the night sharper than they should have. The neighbor, a woman named Mrs. Keller, lingered by her fence pretending to fix a porch plant. Her husband had joined her now. Phone angled discreetly. I felt heat crawl up my neck but didn't speak. Dad cleared his throat. "You've been staying here rent-free for months. I'm not the bad guy for saying enough's enough. Rent-free." I wanted to laugh. Half the tools in his workshop had been mine since trade school. Every extra shift I'd taken went toward the mortgage he still couldn't pay off. But I didn't say a word. I just kept picking up what I could. Boxes, a crate of bolts, a folded tarp, and loading them into the truck bed. When one of the boxes split open, Patricia muttered something like, "Of course," under her breath. I caught the glint of her phone screen again. For a second, I thought she was texting. Then I saw the reflection of red she was recording. My hands trembled once before they steadied. I stacked the last crate and shut the tailgate carefully. Dad said something else, maybe my name, but I didn't hear it. The world had gone oddly quiet except for the buzz of the light and the hum of my truck engine waiting. I got inside, turned the key, and backed down the driveway slow enough to see their faces in the mirror still watching, still pretending they were the ones being wronged. The first mile disappeared in silence. Gravel turned to asphalt, and the house shrank in the rearview mirror until it was just a pale blur between the trees. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to hurt. The road ahead looked endless, a dark ribbon sliding under the headlights. For a while, I couldn't tell if I was angry or hollow. The world outside the glass felt too wide, too quiet. My reflection in the window looked like someone older, someone I didn't quite know. I rolled the window down halfway and let the cold air sting my face. It helped keep the tears back. The toolbox in the passenger seat rattled as I hit a bump. I remembered when Dad and I built that box together in his workshop years ago. He'd shown me how to align the hinges, how to polish the metal until it caught the light. He said, "Always build things that last." I used to think he meant it about more than just steel. I drove past the river bend where he'd taught me to parallel park, past the diner where Mom used to wait for us after work. Every place felt smaller, drained of warmth, like the color had been scraped out. At a red light, I noticed a smear of dust on my hands and wiped them on my jeans. The motion steadied me. You don't stop working because someone decides you don't belong. You keep moving because that's the only thing that still makes sense. By the time I reached the highway, the truck's fuel light blinked. I didn't care where I was heading anymore, just away. The moon hung low over the mountains, pale and distant, as if watching but refusing to interfere. I kept driving until the ache in my chest dulled into something almost manageable. I ended up at Alina Costa's place just after 10. Her porch light was still on, casting a soft circle over the steps. We'd met years ago during a short welding contract in Klamath Falls, two women surrounded by noise and men who underestimated us. Alina had always been the kind who didn't need to ask questions to understand what happened. When she opened the door, I didn't say a word. She just stepped aside. Inside, the air smelled faintly of chamomile tea and detergent. A small lamp glowed in the corner of the living room, washing everything in warm light. Her son's toys were neatly stacked in a basket by the couch. She nodded toward the guest room. "You can stay as long as you need," she said simply, then went back to finishing dishes like she'd been expecting me all along. I unpacked my duffel slowly, each item carrying its own weight welding gloves, tool set, a folded shirt that still smelled faintly of motor oil. At the bottom, tucked beneath a stack of paperwork, was a sealed envelope. Heavy cream paper, my name written in deliberate, looping handwriting I hadn't seen since childhood. Grandpa Ralph Elwood had given it to me a year before he died, saying only, "Don't open it unless things ever get bad." I'd kept it tucked away, assuming it was one of his sentimental gestures, the kind he hid behind jokes about old men and unfinished business. I sat on the bed with the envelope in my lap. The paper was slightly yellowed, the seal thick and unbroken. For a long moment, I just traced the curve of his handwriting with my thumb. The room around me was quiet except for the steady hum of the refrigerator down the hall and the faint whistle of wind outside. Finally, I tore the seal open. Inside were several folded documents and a single handwritten note. His voice came through every uneven line. "Maris, if you're reading this, it means they've done what I feared. You've worked too hard to be treated small. I can't protect you now, but I've made sure you still have a place to stand." I unfolded the paper's legal documents, notarized, transferring partial ownership of the Elwood property and workshop into my name. My throat tightened as I read the signatures. Beneath his, in fading ink, he'd written one last sentence: "When they forget your worth." Remember, I didn't. The next morning, Alina handed me her spare car keys and a cup of coffee before I even asked. "Downtown's quiet on Fridays," she said. "You'll find parking." Her calm made everything feel slightly more possible. I found Arthur Dorsey's office above a florist on Franklin Avenue. The hallway smelled of lilies and old wood. His name was etched in fading gold on a glass door, estate and property law. Inside, time seemed slower. Mahogany desk, worn leather chairs, a clock that ticked softly instead of buzzing. When he looked up, recognition flickered. "You're Ralph's granddaughter," he said. "You used to draw on the back of my meeting notes." His smile held both warmth and restraint. I nodded, holding out the envelope and documents. "I didn't know what to do with these," I said. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. His fingers moved with deliberate care over each page, eyes narrowing slightly at the legal seals. Minutes passed, the quiet only broken by the scratch of paper against his desk. Finally, he looked up. "Your grandfather was thorough. These are legitimate transfers filed, signed, notarized before his passing. You're a part owner of the Elwood property and the workshop out on River Road." The words landed heavier than I expected. For a moment, I could almost hear Grandpa's voice again, that calm certainty in the way he built everything sturdy, measured, built to last. Dorsey leaned back. "If your father's been collecting income or refinancing against these assets without your consent, it may constitute a breach of trust." I swallowed hard. Can we prove that he gave a small nod? We can start by checking property records and recent financial filings. But Maris, this isn't about revenge. It's about restoring what was yours. His tone steadied something inside me. For months, I'd been shrinking, defending, apologizing, surviving. Now, for the first time, it felt like standing up didn't have to mean fighting. It could simply mean not looking down anymore. When I left the office, the afternoon light had softened to gold. I sat in the truck for a while, the papers on the passenger seat fluttering in the breeze from the half-open window, and let the idea sink in. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. By the time I got back to Alina's house, my phone was vibrating nonstop on the counter. 12 missed calls, 8 new messages. Dad's first text was short. We need to talk. The next one, longer. You're making a mistake. Patricia says you're overreacting. Then came the voicemails, his voice calm, almost polite, the way people sound when they're trying to sound innocent. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I sat by the window, letting the screen light fade each time a new notification appeared. Alina was in the kitchen helping her son with homework. The normal sounds of their life pencil scratches, running water, laughter made the storm in my pocket seem smaller. That night, I opened my grandfather's folder again and spread the papers across the table. Property maps, dates, signatures. Each mark was proof that I wasn't the ghost they'd painted me to be. I took photos of every page and sent them to Mr. Dorsey with a short message. Proceed as you think best. He replied almost instantly. Understood. The next morning, the calls slowed but didn't stop. Patricia left a voicemail saying she wanted to clear the air. I deleted it halfway through. Around noon, Dad texted again. We can fix this. Just come home. The words felt smaller than they used to like. They belonged to a man who'd lost the power to define what home meant. That evening, when the house went quiet, I pulled out my old notebook, the one I hadn't touched in years. The first line came easily. They hear me only when I stop explaining. I wrote until the page filled, the pen moving steady and sure. For the first time in weeks, the silence didn't feel like an absence. It felt like ownership. It happened 3 days later, just after sunset. Alina was at her sister's for the evening, and her son was asleep. The knock came sharp and deliberate, echoing through the quiet hallway. I froze, recognizing the rhythm before I even reached the door. Through the peephole, I saw all 3 of them, Dad, Patricia, and Griffin, my cousin. Dad stood in front, arms crossed, jaw set. Patricia hovered close behind him, holding a tissue she hadn't used. Griffin leaned against the wall, pretending he wasn't part of it. Maris, Dad called, his voice almost breaking. Please open up. We just want to talk. I unlocked the security app on my phone and opened the camera feed instead. The image showed them in grainy grayscale, shifting awkwardly under the porch light. I pressed the intercom button. All communication goes through Mr. Dorsey, I said. Patricia's voice followed, soft but strained. It doesn't have to be this way. We can settle everything like a family. I leaned against the doorframe, letting the quiet stretch. Families don't throw each other's lives into garbage bags, I said evenly. Griffin muttered something under his breath, a sharp curse that didn't quite reach me. Dad shot him a look before stepping closer. You think this is about the house? It's about respect. You went behind my back. I followed Grandpa's paperwork. I interrupted. My voice stayed steady. To my surprise. You're the one who ignored it. For a moment? No one spoke. The porch light flickered, catching the edge of Patricia's mascara-streaked cheek. She shifted, glancing down the hall like she wanted to be anywhere else. Dad sighed heavily. You're hiding behind lawyers now. That's not how we handle things. You told me I wasn't your daughter, I said quietly. This is how strangers handle things. Something flickered in his face. Shock, maybe, or understanding. He turned away first. Griffin kicked at the step, muttering another curse. Patricia reached for Dad's arm, urging him toward the car. None of them looked back as they walked down the driveway. I stayed there until the sound of their engine faded into the night. The hallway felt bigger than before, emptier but cleaner somehow. On my phone, the camera feed still showed the porch light swaying gently in the wind. I locked the door, double-checked the bolt, and exhaled. Then I sat at the table, opened my laptop, and found an email from Mr. Dorsey waiting in my inbox subject line settlement draft. 2 weeks later, the papers were signed. Mr. Dorsey handled everything with the precision of someone who'd spent decades watching families undo themselves over pride. The settlement arrived by mail in a plain brown envelope, legal signatures. Property rights affirmed, repayment schedule outlined in neat rows. I read it twice, not for clarity, but disbelief. It was over. Alina helped me move into a small loft by the Deschutes River. The floorboards creaked, and the windows whistled when the wind came through. But it was mine. My name was on the lease. My paychecks covered the bills, and the walls held no memories I had to flinch from. The first evening there, I unpacked one box at a time, filling the silence with small, ordinary sounds, the kettle boiling, the rustle of paper, the hum of the fridge. On the second night, another envelope arrived. Inside was a check for the first installment of the back payments and a folded note in Dad's handwriting. "We hope we can put this behind us and be a family again." I read it once, then laid it on the counter. The words didn't sting or soothe. They were just words, lighter than air. Later, while sorting through a drawer, I found my old external drive, the one Grandpa helped me back up years ago. I plugged it in, and a single audio file blinked on the screen. For Maris. His voice filled the room, steady and warm. "Kiddo, you're going to be okay. Even if they never say they're sorry. Some people only value you when they can use you, when you stop letting them. They call it betrayal. Let them." I let the recording play twice, then saved it to the cloud. The river outside kept its quiet rhythm, carrying the night forward.